Hey, Kate, thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hi, LuAnn. Glad to be here.
I have to say, first of all, it's funny seeing you. We talk to each other 1,000 times in a week, but we do it on Voxer. And I'm like, oh, you're so pretty. I forget how pretty you are sometimes.
I know, I feel like we're just gazing lovingly at each other as we chat today. Usually we're just walkie-talkieing.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. But so many good things come up out of our Voxer conversations. I mean, to the point that well, first of all, our two schedules are so ridiculous that we had this idea in May of last year. We're recording this in October. I remember I was at my granddaughter Lucy's lacrosse practice. We're Voxering back and forth. And all of a sudden I'm like, Kate, we got to talk about this on the show. My God, everything you talk about, we got to talk about on the show. So it took us, 6 or 7 months to be in the same place at the same time. But here we are, my friend. Here we are.
I'm so glad we've managed to make it work out. And I remember it too. I was wandering around on my back porch, throwing sticks to the dog in between meetings, trying to get just a little vitamin D before I hopped into the next meeting. And yeah, our conversations as they do, they sort of meander through the day because one of us will send one message and 2 meetings later the other will respond and we just go on and on.
Exactly. So one of the conversations that we had, and we specifically made note of it because we're like, this is a good one, was the mindset difference and also the strategic difference between an entrepreneur who is growth focused and an entrepreneur who's scale focused. And as per typical, you just like nail me to the wall when you like, well, LuAnn, my opinion on that is, and I'm like, well, that is about the smartest thing I've ever heard in my life. So, Kate, talk to us about these two different focuses and how do you see them showing up in businesses?
Sure. I mean, I think that I have a unique perspective because I have founded a business. I've co-founded a business, but I have also been the second generation of a business founded by my mother. So I've seen it from both sides. I saw how she grew her business and I've observed others. And what I see over and over again is that some of the most successful entrepreneurs, people founding businesses, are incredibly revenue focused. They're incredible salespeople. They are competitive. They want to grow. They want they want to win the game every single time. I mean, how many times have I heard you say, well, all Vin had to say was, you didn't beat last year. This isn't actually quite, this wasn't actually your best month if you really want to break it down. And next thing you know, out goes LuAnn and sells another 25,000 so she can beat herself. So, and Martha was that way too. And I've seen so many entrepreneurs do that. And it's a really good way and a really powerful way to grow a business and even to grow it quickly is to be that almost myopically focused on the one thing. But it can't stay the one thing forever without either another voice in the business or a little bit of a change in mindset. There needs to be something else because at some point, if you're going to keep growing, and by growing, I mean keep increasing revenue, you're probably going to also have a growing team. The circumstances of your business will change. And for those things to change and actually continue functioning, your business has to change too. And once you start thinking about process and systems, and there are rules for how we do things, and we can't just cowboy everything. It's not the wild, wild west anymore. Now we actually need to shift the mindset a little bit because the one and only important factor stops being, did we make the sale? Because we have to start looking at the bottom line and we have to make sure that, and the bottom line becomes a bigger part of the conversation. The team is bigger, for instance. So great, we've made a lot of sales over here. And I've heard you talk about this with other people on your podcast when you're interviewing. Yeah, we were making all of these sales, but then these members of our team had nothing to do because we weren't paying attention to the cycle of how things were working and so on. So it seems to me that really successful founders are sales focused, and then people who decide they want to grow beyond a certain size and really take on a higher volume. I think it's more volume that we're talking about. Those folks start to really dig into scale and how do you scale, and they start being a little more process focused. You tend to also see that between first and second generation business owners too, I think.
Yeah. It's so funny because just this past week, you said to me, Lou, it's so often when I talk to you, I feel like, Martha is combination of so many of the attributes that you talk about with Vinny, but then so many of your attributes too. It's like sometimes I'm like, I'm not who am I talking to, right? And as you're explaining this, what I'm thinking about is Vinny. I'm
Mhm.
thinking about Vin because Vin is the driving force of window work starting in 1982. And of course, I came in and I was sales, but he was operational. He was the managing partner, right? And we know this. But the funny thing is I have, in the last several years, we all talk about traction and we know Jickman. How about that? Gino
Mhm.
Wickman. How about that? Well, I'm always saying the guy's name the right way. We know Jickman. Gino Wickman, right? And as I have read these books over and over again, multiple times, I'm like, Vinny is actually like this really weird unicorn of a visionary and an integrator. Like he's not 100% visionary by any stretch of the imagination. Like, open the dictionary and you get his description of it, and there's my face. You open up integrator, there's definitely Vinny's face, but Vinny's face also should be in that visionary column. So I think what's interesting is that no question, as a founder, Vinny was like drive, 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 sales, 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 sales. But he also was always getting us in the weeds on process and system from the beginning. Okay.
Mm.
So it's
Mhm.
really an interesting thing, but I think he's unusual. I think to your point, you line up 20 visionary startup business owners, 18 of them were like, wait, what? Like, wait, there's 12
Right.
people here now. Like, how do we do this stuff? Right. And so it's an interesting observation, right?
Yeah, well, I think particularly within our industry, because ours is an industry of small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't go into it maybe with dreams of growing large, but you grow into it with that focused on what most people do, which is stay relatively speaking small.
Yeah.
And so it you don't go in with a thought that, oh, we need to have infrastructure, we need to have this or that. I mean, Martha is a former accountant turned interior designer. So she's all about the finances and she's all about the design. And she wants very little part in the operations. That part is just boring and she wants nothing to do with it. If anything, I feel like this would be you, LuAnn. I've
Yes.
had conversations with her before where she's been like, why is the software telling me how I get to do my job? Aren't I in charge here? She's actually said that to me. And I'm like, well, yeah, but also like
Yes.
the
And
software, you know, the software does have certain limitations, and if we can work with it, then we can have like standard ways of doing things. Everything can't be a one-off.
that's like I always say, you're not charging me. You're not the boss of me.
Truly, we've had that conversation. So yeah, I think that it's helpful when you can be process oriented, but I think the reverse can be problematic too. When you have someone who is starting a business and they're so process oriented,
Yes, they're
those
in
are
the
often
weeds,
they're
right? They're
completely
not.
in the weeds.
It's
Like
like,
they
oh,
can't
do we have
start because
sales?
nothing's
I don't
perfect.
know. I don't have everything set up yet. I have to make one more template and one
Yeah,
more this. It's like just go
absolutely.
get a job.
Yeah.
Go close a
Just
deal, right?
go figure it out. And I sit in my role sort of between. So I'll sometimes be in conversations maybe with business development or sales team member with this great idea. And then I've got over here some operational and administrative people being like, yeah, but that sounds terrible. From an actual execution
Right, to
standpoint,
getting
that
it
sounds
done.
like so much work to try to assemble that. And it's so outside of our wheelhouse. And then I have to kind of sit between and say, okay, I get where they're coming from and I get where they're coming from. Is there a way to do this? Is this a good idea? Is this not a good idea? I mean, I was in a meeting yesterday and we were kind of doing that very dance. And it's important because you have to continue. If you want to continue growing, you have to continue staying in a growth mindset. But if you want to be able to grow in volume, if
Yeah.
you want multiple offices or a large team or a high volume of clients, even if they are kind of in that luxury realm, then you absolutely need to have process, because if every single designer on your team is functioning just a little bit differently, what happens when one of them has to go on a leave and another designer takes over, and now your
Right.
client feels like they've hired a completely different design firm because things aren't consistent? Or what happens when they haven't documented things because there isn't really a process for that and they just have it all in their head? Well, what happens to your client, and how does that, and that's one of a million ways that
Mm.
you can think about it. What happens when you want to open that other office and you discover, as Martha did, how reliant our original office was on her day-to-day leadership? So you
Oh.
have to to grow and scale, you have to make yourself less and less essential to the day-to-day operations, because the day-to-day operations are buttoned up, because there are clear lines of communication that run around you or to other people, because there are clear decision makers outside of you. And that's, I mean, we were talking the other day, LuAnn, about how there came a point when I was chatting with Martha, and I was like, this was many years ago, but I was like, I'm sorry to say, but you've become a little bit of a bottleneck
Yeah,
here.
you're
And
the
she was like, what
problem.
are you talking about? I'm not a bottleneck. I'm making things happen. And I mean, she's brilliant. She's wonderful. But I was like, yeah, but do you see this stack, of checks sitting on your desk? Some of these are for $100. Why do you need to approve them? And she was like, well, that's how I know everything happening in the business. This is the
AKA the
accounting
Vin Man.
here.
This is
Yeah.
literally Vinny.
Right? I was like, well, that makes sense. But do they all need to be approved by you? Could you have that stack to review on your own time, but the ones that require your approval, have a monetary threshold? And, that was, even things like that for her were kind of like, do I really want to do that? Because she is an accountant,
Yes.
Thin Man wouldn't want to let go of that.
No.
And so those sorts of things become, I think, interesting. You as a founder might not be financially oriented or have that accounting background, but you might be very, very focused on your brand style
Right.
and the type of design that you're delivering to your clients. Or if you're me, you might be very concerned with how every email is written and the language used. I'm very, very focused
Too.
on that.
Me
It's
too.
very, very important to me. And so how can you find ways to, and this is something that comes up a lot at conferences when I'm chatting with people. They'll say, I run every project. How could I possibly pass any of these to someone else? And I'm like, well, you don't have to, but if you want to grow, how can you not? You don't have a choice. So you have to find someone you trust. You have to be able to define, the essentials. You have to, and this is even from a design standpoint, you're starting to create a little bit of an SOP of this is what's required.
Yeah.
And you can have them formally or informally in a lot of different ways, but they need to exist.
Yeah. So thinking about that, somebody listening, whether they are a firm of one person, a bookkeeper, and an assistant, and they aspire to have maybe one or two designers work for them, or they're already at 5 or 6 people and they aspire to have 10 or 15 or 20 people and be much larger like your own firm is. The thing is, the bottom line is the same. It's like the scaling from 1 to 5 look, the doing of it is different, but the core principles are the same. And I would say what also is alignment there is, you mentioned having your firm in, was Minnesota was first and then Texas was second, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like, okay, we got our everything together, we're organized, let's open in Texas. And then all of a sudden it sounds like you guys were like, whoa, 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 too much was
Hmm.
relying on Martha or yourself being around for the day to day. So talk about that. I think even that learning lesson of Minnesota to Texas translates to us, whether it's us to 2 other people or us to 10 other people. But what were
Hmm.
those stick points, that problems? Because you're coming from a well-run business in Minnesota, and I'm assuming that there was an expectation that we're ready for this. You don't strike me ever in any conversation where like, let's just throw the spaghetti at the wall and see if we survive in Texas. You know what I'm saying? So
No.
what was your right? So you thought you were ready, and what were the comeuppances that you were like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, there totally were some. I think the main things, and I bet you'll relate to this. Martha is so optimistic and she absolutely believes the very best in everyone. And she has such an internal LuAnn style engine,
We can get
and
it done.
she is going to sell. She's going to do the thing. She will always do things in the best interest of the business. And she just had an expectation everyone's going to function that way. Everyone will always function that way because why wouldn't you? Of course you're going to. And there was no malicious intent by anyone on the business, but it's like, oh, like LuAnn's not in the
Nobody's
building.
here.
Martha's not in the building. Maybe I'll just come in jeans and a sweatshirt today. Maybe I'll just, and not that jeans and a sweatshirt is a problem, but you can imagine just the little things like,
That
oh,
add
maybe I
up.
won't do that today. Maybe that'll slide.
Mm.
Maybe that'll slide. And the problem wasn't that things were sliding. That was a problem. But the problem that was on a larger scale was sometimes there was no policy. There was no written expectation. There was just the sort of accountability of, I know if Martha were here, this is what she would want. So it's what I'm going to do because she is here. And then when she's not, well, maybe I'll do it this way. Maybe I'll do it that way.
Yeah,
Things will
it'll
shift
get
a little
done
bit.
faster. I'll get done at 4 instead of 4:30, and
Exactly. Like then the day wraps up a little. And so that started to happen a little bit. And then it was exacerbated, I think, by the fact, and this is what happens up until 5, 6, 7 people, you can manage everyone. But there
Mhm.
comes somewhere between 5 and 10 and
Mhm.
10 and 15. There are these kind of tipping points where there needs to be lines of communication. And this too is awkward, right? We've been
Yes.
very egalitarian. There's one boss and everyone else is on an equal playing field. And now we need someone else to be an authority within the office, and being the first person aside from the founder to be a point of authority and decision making among people who have been your coworkers up until that point is
Brutal.
difficult. It's
I can't even
really
imagine. Yeah.
difficult.
Yep. I've watched it at
And
Window Works. It's tough. It's so
and it
tough.
doesn't always work.
And you're exactly right. It's exactly that dynamic. It's like we're all for one and one for all. There's 5 of us. Let's go, rah rah shuskumba. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, there's 10 of us, and somebody has to speak when I'm not here, and somebody has to make sure you do the things when I'm not here. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, you're my boss now? Nah, I don't think
Mhm.
so.
And yeah, and I think that identifying the right managers is
Ah,
really, really tricky,
yeah,
because you have theoretically up until this point, you've been totally sales focused. So it's very easy to say, well, my top designer who does the top work, who does the biggest sales, that's going to be my leader.
yes.
Or my, fill in the blank, but whatever you have had as a performance priority, we often tend to say, well, that should be the manager. But the thing is, to excel at a skill does not mean you're ever going to manage it very well.
That's
It
right.
doesn't mean you'll manage it badly, but it absolutely they're
It's
not
just not the
correlated.
indicator. Yeah.
No,
It's so
not at
funny
all.
because I was in a coaching session yesterday with some window treatment professionals that are members of Exciting Windows. And they're at the point where they've got together between all of them 5 salespeople. Now, the founder is included as a salesperson, and one of the longtime, employees is also included in that. And I said, so who's going to be the sales manager? And they said who the person was going to be. And it was not the founder, right? Okay.
Mhm.
And I looked at him and I said, okay, and I want to know 2 things. And this person was in the Zoom. And I said, A, do you have any desire to be the sales manager? And B, do you have any skill set or knowledge of how to be a sales manager? And of course, like I'm with my people, right? These aren't
Mhm.
strangers, right? And so they all just like look at me like, whoa. And she, to her credit, went, no, I don't have any idea how to be a sales manager. So then I looked at the founder and I'm like, and so how did we select her? And she's like, well, she's our best salesperson. I'm like, yeah, see, can we put the brakes here? Like, just
Yeah.
because you can throw a ball doesn't mean you can teach somebody to throw a ball, right? Like it's a
No.
different, and she might be the right person. And that, to your point,
Mhm.
I went on to have a little bit less tense and a little bit more calm conversation about it, but just saying it's fine if you are, but we've got to select you as the sales manager based on a skill set for managing other salespeople, not for being a shark in the water, because they're 2 different things.
Totally different. And it's often the people who are best at something who aren't going to be as good at coaching it or teaching it, because it probably comes so naturally to them that they don't have the vocabulary or and they haven't even had to think through troubleshooting the things they'll have to manage.
Plus,
You
you know
know,
what? In their case, I'm like, and so now your sales are going to drop while your star is over there nurturing everybody else. Let's think
Mhm.
about that. You know what I
Right?
mean? It's like, leave her out there to pull the train, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Exactly, exactly. And then that can happen too. I think about our business as having 3 primary departments. We have our design and sales. We have what we call just admin, which is so many things. It's everything from finance and bookkeeping to purchasing and customer service and tracking and so on. And then we have marketing and business development. And all of these things are inextricably tied, right? There are so many moments where we're like, well, this will be a cross-departmental project. And that is something that as we've grown from, 10 to 20 and now 20 to 30, we continue to have these moments of, oh, we've hit another milestone, folks. We need to rediscuss this, because now we're talking a lot within the last year about the importance of having a process for cross-departmental projects. So we've gone long past are the days where we wear a lot of hats. Now I don't want to hear that. I do not want to hear we wear a lot of hats, because if
Right.
you're wearing a lot of hats, that's actually generally not good for
Mhm.
the overall business once you reach a certain size. Instead, you know your job and you have a specific set of skills that we are maximizing, and we all pitch in and support each other. So like
Sure.
wearing a lot of hats is gone. It's more of a, hey, everyone needs to pitch in today for this one thing. Sure. But what happens now is we'll have these projects and initiatives that it's like, well, we need someone from admin and we need someone from marketing. We need someone on the design side. We all need to come together and figure some things out. And so in those moments, how do we figure out who's in charge, so suddenly we're like talking like a tech company and we're saying, well, who's our project manager for this, and who's, and it works. I mean, there's a
Right.
reason larger companies work this way, but we're having to actually adopt things that we haven't had to before. And there are these milestone moments. And
Right.
I think the the scary thing to say that is a reality is sometimes the team that gets you to one milestone is not going to be the same team that can get you to the next,
Right.
because there has to be such a big shift in thinking. And some of your best team members are the ones who are going to be able to be adaptable enough and open enough and trusting enough to shift with the times.
Mhm.
But it won't be for everyone, and it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have an employee say, I this doesn't work for me, this
Right.
no longer works for me. It can be heart-wrenching, but it also can be the right thing for them and the business. And these all become these weird learning moments that happen in the transition from kind of a growth startup focus to scalable growth focus.
Right.
And they come with growing pains. And I
Yeah.
think especially on the early end, they can feel so personal, because how many small businesses says we're family here?
Sure.
Now, I work for my mom, and everyone on the team knows we don't describe ourselves as a family. We
I
do
know.
not describe ourselves. We can't be a family, because if we're a family, we can be close, we can be supportive, we can be so many things, but too many families are dysfunctional, and I don't want a dysfunctional business, so we're not going to be a family. Like,
Well,
truly.
it's funny because, my cousin, Eileen, right? And Eileen is
Yeah.
a leadership, behavior, organizational expert, all the words behind her name. And over the years, as she has helped us navigate a lot of the same exact things that you're describing. Like, I'm just literally memory lane going down these different growth things that have happened to us through the years. I can tell you that she has never said to us, please stop describing yourself as a family business. Like, she's never said brakes on it. And so in marketing and advertising, we do family owned and operated 40 plus years, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
But she has asked Vinny and I many times, going back 10 and 15 years, to stop making those really cozy, familiar references to us all being a family. To your point. Now, I've never said that out loud. I've never even said it to the team, but she has always said, listen, I get it. Some of these people are, 40 years old and been with you 16 years, like their whole adult lives. You know what I'm saying? A lot of our team is long lived like that with us. And she said, but it isn't actually a family. And you will, when you need to, make decisions for the betterment of the business that you may or may not make if it was actually your daughter or your son or your brother or your sister, right? And she said, and I would still be an advocate for making the good decisions regardless of who it is. She said, but let's just be serious between us right here. Like,
Yeah.
you can't, basically what she was saying is, you as the founders do not want to pull the family card when you're not actually going to use the family card in all situations.
That is
Right.
exactly right.
Right.
And it's also that point too of, if we're all family, there's just there's too many opportunities to sort of take advantage of that sort of
Mhm.
mindset. You
Mhm.
never would. I hope I never would, but there's
Mhm.
too many opportunities to sort of take advantage because we're like family, because we're
Mhm.
like family.
Mhm.
And actually, one of the greatest compliments I think I ever received before I started running the company, it was when I was doing my role and Martha was doing her role. We were working together. Was when one of our design associates, who's now a fabulous designer in Nashville, she just offhandedly said, God, I just sometimes forget you and Martha are related. And I
Wow.
was like, oh, we're doing it right. We are doing it right. Because we're very much, mom and daughter outside of
Sure.
work, but within work, we're working
You're
and
professional,
we're
yeah.
professional.
Yeah.
And then the flip side, of course, of that story is we did once, I call her Martha in the office, or I did. She's not in the office much anymore. And mom all the rest of the time. But when I first started, I was getting used to calling her Martha, and I was calling her Martha in the office all the time. And we went on a family vacation. We were going skiing. I convinced my parents, hey, we should do a lesson so you guys don't, break something. And so the instructor, we're going through and we're doing the lesson with the instructor. And on the way up, I'm riding up the chairlift with him this time. And he turns to me and he goes, your stepmom is so athletic. And I was like, my who?
My what?
He was like, my what? Yeah. And he was like, oh, well, you call your dad and you call your mom Martha. And I was like, oh, well, I knew it was important to call her Martha at the office. And now I know why it's important to call her mom at home. So then I, I learned that one. She is very athletic though.
The takeaway is she's very
Yeah.
that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Well, well, I can't say that anybody in 40 plus years would say, wait, you and Vin are married?
That's different, I imagine.
We don't lock it down so good. We don't lock it down so good.
Yeah, that would be tricky.
Yeah,
But I
all
think,
out there hanging in the wind. The good, the bad, the ugly.
yeah, well, and I just feel like when you move though from that small to larger business mentality, it you start to, this is one of the steps. I think, if you're somebody who's thinking, I want to go from 1 to 5, you can go from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
You can do that. If you're ready to go from 5 to 10, it's time to start thinking about a shift in mindset. And if you're really smart, which I wish we had been, but we didn't know enough to be this smart back then, you'll start talking about the shift in mindset. You'll start
Yes.
giving people the
So
opportunity
right.
to know, hey,
The
we're
winds are
growing,
changing. The
things
winds
are
are
changing,
taking.
and to
Yes.
grow, to make this really good for our clients, to be customer service oriented, consistent, and all of these things we've always said we are going to have to start shifting our mindsets. We're going to have to start having systems and all these different things. And then from that 5 to 10, you also might need to start having new reporting structures. Everyone
That's
doesn't report to you anymore. And that shift, and this is where it connects back to that family business idea, that shift toward having new reporting structures is when it really does behoove you not to have been, we're all family, because now the person is reporting to someone that's been their family all along, and the person who's managing is managing a family member, and that just makes an already challenging situation all the more so. It's so much easier to shift these reporting structures as you hire. If you can do that, then you're really in good shape, because you can say, okay, the next person we hire will report to you. And then there's no starting point of, we were all a family and all on the same page, and nobody reported to anyone, and now I have to oversee this person. That's the ideal from my perspective and observation, and it helps. But yeah, in doing that, you also need to stop and take the time to assess what makes a good manager.
Mhm.
A manager is self-reflective. A manager is a great communicator. A manager is happy to share the spotlight or even sit in shadows. A great manager is willing to give credit for things that they probably deserve credit for. But, like, really, how many times has a great manager allowed someone else to have the credit for the thing that maybe they just sort of contributed to?
Even when you're
You know?
choking on it, it's okay.
Yeah, totally.
You're
And
like,
a
"Yeah,
good
you did that,
manager
sweetie. That's good."
exactly, exactly. That was perfect. That was perfect. And a really good manager too is comfortable giving feedback, is a lot less concerned with being nice and a lot more concerned with being kind.
Yeah.
And a kindness is honesty. A kindness is an opportunity to improve. Nice is just saying you did fine,
Right.
and the business suffers or the manager
No,
suffers.
you
And
have to
eventually the employee suffers because they
y
won't progress.
yeah, you have to find the truth in it. That doesn't mean you are unkind, but if you're
Yeah.
not willing to be truthful, then, you're just ineffective, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you can't help somebody grow through the tough parts, well, then what's the point of you, right? They can
Mhm.
stumble on their own. Their manager or their leader is there to guide them through it. And you,
Yeah.
you have to face the truth in this situation. But I want to go back to the thing that you said about that 5 to 10 growth and that scaling at that level. And in hindsight, that you would suggest that we all start those conversations with that existing 1 to 5 team. And that mirrors our experience exactly. It's, when I think about it, just kind of happened around us. And all of a sudden, it was exactly as you said. It was like, whether it's me and Vin making assumptions that XYZ person just knew that they were already going to, like, you used to be the only installer and now there's 3 others. Well, you're the installer, you're in charge of installers. like not me, I'm not in charge of installers, but it's not that preparation conversation of things are going to be different and blah blah blah. And I find that with and now I'm thinking various companies that I've either coached or even my own company here. And, now there's no one person in my mind when I'm thinking about this. It's kind of like the Achilles heel. It's,
Mhm.
it's the person that 2, 3, 5, 8 years later still doesn't understand that you're supposed to be leading somebody, that you are supposed to be affecting and influencing what happens in your area of the business. And even now know those conversations have been well had and all those things do happen. And there's the dilemma of, like, to be completely truthful, there's the dilemma of, like, fake authority, right? It's like you are the person for this position because of all the dynamics, experience, length of service, clout in the business, all of the things, but yet years later, you're actually not managing and leading. And
Mhm.
it's a constant, hey, you're supposed to get the 2 or 3 people in that department on your team. And I have to say, maybe at 30 people, it would be easier to sift through those. But I think that's the particular challenge of 5 to 10 and even 5 to 15. You can't just toss the fish back, right? And if they don't have found their way out because they're like, hey, I liked it better when it was smaller. Like, there's this thing of liking the feeling of being in charge of people, but not actually taking charge of people.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Whereas if I
Well,
knew I
I
was
do.
going
I
to
was going
scale
to
another 10 people, I'd be like, we're cleaning house. And maybe I wouldn't. I don't know.
No, I mean, I agree with you entirely. I was going to say the same thing. It's, somebody who's worked at or run a team on a really large company might have a hard time relating to this conversation because the the seismic impact of having a single team member kind of in the wrong role or in a
Yes.
role of authority who doesn't know how to manage that authority or to manage people is massive. Whereas if you're on a
Yes.
team of 300, that's just one person. Is it
Right.
going to have a negative impact? For sure. But
Right.
is it, how is there going to be a limit to the reach? Yeah. But when you're on a team of 5, 10, 15, there's no limit to that reach. It,
That's
it
right.
reaches
It
the
affects
entire
everything.
team. And it's really difficult to fix. It's really difficult to reverse. It's really difficult. It's just a very difficult situation. So going in to a situation like that, where you say, okay, we've reached 5 and the growth isn't going away and everyone's motivated and we all want to see it happen. Well, now is when we need to start talking then about what does it look like at 10? How will we structure things? How will we need to compartmentalize some of our roles? This
Yeah.
is great. We're now going to get to be more streamlined and focusing on the things we do best and well and that we enjoy most, but also we're going to have new lines of communication and people that we need to report to. And one thing that I've found in a small business, if I can offer a tip in doing this, is that it can be really helpful to have someone slightly outside of the role itself to be the manager.
Mm.
Somebody who isn't, if you have a team of multiple designers and they need someone to report to, maybe they need to report to somebody who is not herself or himself a designer.
Mm.
That can be effective. Maybe they are overseeing something administratively or something in on the business development side or what have you, but maybe they need to report a little bit differently. And we've seen that work well, whereas reporting to another designer can be problematic for a host of reasons, including now that what is the designer's job? They're not really able to design, and maybe they were
Right.
your top performer, or maybe they're just not so inclined, and on and on. And likewise, so if you, it's just something to consider.
Yeah.
From our part, within our company right now, our designers still report to me, but and I oversee the design department, but I have different people overseeing marketing and different people overseeing finance and operations. And then, so I'm kind of overseeing our designers. And then I also sit at the nexus point of everyone who's overseeing another department, including myself, reports to myself, and all of that comes together. So there's, and you'll have those moments where you think, oh, I'm filling sort of multiple roles since I'm running the company. I'm filling multiple roles right now, but knowing that for myself is helpful because it lets me know we might reach a point where one day that's a role that will need to be filled. Who do the
Right.
designers report to?
Right.
That isn't me. Or maybe that's always going to be my role. I don't need to decide that, but knowing that it exists makes it possible to think about and plan for when and if the time comes. And there's just so many ways to structure things, but being ready to think ahead and being ready to talk to the team about it, I think makes a big difference.
It's critical.
And
Hindsight,
then,
it's critical. Yeah.
yeah, isn't it nice, to think back and be like, oh, I
Exactly.
could do it right if I did it again. I could avoid so many pitfalls. But then down the road, once you get to, if you're a team of 10 to 15 and you think you're growing to 20 or beyond, that's when, as I mentioned earlier, now you, in all likelihood, you have successful managers within your team. You have clear reporting structures. You have, pretty good processes, and hopefully they're documented. And if not, now would be a great time to do it, because
I'd say a
before you
little
hit that
late,
point,
but
yeah,
20
but
people, a little
you'd
late.
be
But do it,
surprised.
but do it. Yes, right. Like, but don't not do it just because you're
Mhm.
25 people and you haven't done it yet.
Yeah, and don't
1000%.
absolutely. I mean, I've sat in meetings before or in conferences and things, or listened to podcasts where I feel my anxiety rising because I'm thinking, oh gosh, we should have probably done that
Well, right.
10
And
years
like,
ago.
we don't all have everything buttoned up,
No,
right? Like,
no, we
no,
don't.
there's no one of us. Like, I always say to everybody, like, even I go crazy on everybody's website because it's important to me and because you're mostly trying to attract people through websites. And then every once in a while, I look at the WindowWorks website and I'm like, oh, God. And
Absolutely.
not from what Nicole has done, but like our About You page has not been updated in like 4 years. Like, I'm just like, girl, you know what I'm saying? But the thing
Yeah,
is, WindowWorks is, it's 40 plus years. It's got 40,000 customers. 60% of them are calling us up again and they don't care what's on our About You page, right? So
right.
it's to your point, it's that right there. Every one of us has things where we're like, ooh, I could be doing that better. I could
A
be doing that better.
100%, a
Yeah. No
100%. And
matter
I've got,
how good we are in other areas, right?
yes. Oh yeah, I've got a list. I've got a
Yeah.
list of things, and I look at what small, medium, and large size businesses do with admiration every day and think, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I wish we did that. I wish we
Yeah.
did that. Sometimes the being small or being, relatively new, because we've been in business for over 35 years now, sometimes being in your first 3 years is such a superpower in itself because you are so flexible. You're
Yeah.
so able to adjust. You can adapt. You can make changes really quickly, or you can create something with the tools available today. Whereas O'Hara Interiors was founded on triplicate. I mean,
Yes. Oh,
literally,
us
we're,
too. Carbon
you know,
copies, pink,
yeah,
white, and yellow.
it's like, and so imagine, we talk about, when we talk about scaling, hopefully this is something that smaller businesses today won't struggle with as much.
Mm.
But there are, I would argue, possibly none, but certainly very few ERP systems for designers that are designed for a business that reaches a certain size and level of complexity. There are some
Mm.
really good ones from 1 to 5, maybe up to 10.
Mm.
And then when you get to 10 to 15 and 15 to 20 and up to 30 and multiple locations and clients, it gets really complicated.
Mhm.
And so a business that was built when, and I think this applies even to the idea of scaling, you need to have infrastructure, you need to have process, you probably need to have software that can support your business.
Mhm.
And you would be surprised. I even was, and here I am, the one telling Martha, hey, we need this, we need this. And yet within the last year or two, I found myself surprised when my admin team came to me and said, you're talking about growth that we can't handle right now.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, do we need more people? And they're like, no, 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 no. Our system doesn't work this way.
Oh.
And
Your
we,
project management system that you're talking
yeah,
about,
our
where all
project
your
management, the
designers
whole
and procurement people
ERP,
all talk to each other.
yeah, how the accounting system works and tracks things and
Yes.
all, but that with the project management system, all these things, they don't work that way. And so we found ourselves thinking, oh, well, hmm. And suddenly I felt a little bit like Martha, like, who's the software to say we can't grow? I suddenly was in that role. But it was like, no, this is a complex problem that requires a complex infrastructure that we do not have. And so in talking with people about this, I basically say, we're basically a house that was built in the 80s, because the business was founded in the 80s, that's undergone some pretty bad remodels, just to kind of patch things together and keep things going. And now we've got to gut the whole house and build something that will work
Yeah.
for the future. That's where we are just from an IT standpoint. And so that's what we've been doing all year. And we're close. We're very close
Yeah.
to having it all
Yeah.
buttoned up. And we're very excited about that.
And you're
But that too.
actually, just for clarity, because I know it from our past conversations, you are investing in developing a proprietary software that your
Mhm.
business will run off of, because,
We are. We are.
we both know Sarah, the
Oh,
Mydoma,
she's fabulous.
absolutely. But you're
Fabulous.
just
Yeah.
saying you're not running 20 designers off of Mydoma is what you're saying, or
We
whatever.
haven't, and we've looked into there's so many, there are a lot out there, and they all do a lot of really good things. They just didn't all hit every one of our buttons.
Mhm.
Everyone could hit anywhere from 40% of our buttons to maybe 80%.
Mhm.
And we had to look at that remaining percentage and say, how willing are we to change our business to fit
Yeah.
this software? And there was, every single time there was something we couldn't, that just was a no-go for us for one reason or another. And a lot of those no-goes, I will say, came back to our business was founded before these things existed.
Yes.
Had we founded them now, we
You
could
would
have
just
built
do it.
it to
Right.
fit.
To go
Yeah.
alone.
So that's where I think there is a bit of a superpower, because the tools exist. But for those of us that have been around for a certain
Yep.
period of time or have grown to a certain level of complexity, we don't have much choice.
And it's the
We've got
truth,
to
because
figure
we
this out.
have this same situation at WindowWorks. We started with a CRM there, a particular brand. Well, I shouldn't say we started. We went to it about 10 years ago, and it was probably our third one at that point. And now in the last 6 months, JC is like, this thing doesn't work for us anymore, and we're all like, uh-oh, like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
This will be, when we switch off of this, let's see, we had the thing. This is our fourth software that we've used. The first one was like, am I going to say it right? Like DOS based, like from the
Hmm.
80s,
Yep.
actually. Like,
Yeah, that's right.
I'm like, I didn't even go on it. I was like, I mean, we had that for like
Yeah.
4 years. I never once logged into it. I'm like, this is just like mom. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this stuff. Here's my
Someone else
paperwork.
can do it.
You
Yeah.
think it needs to be in a computer. Good for you. Put it in a computer. I don't know what to tell you, but make sure when you want me to do something, put it back to me in front of me in paper. Right.
Yes.
But we did eventually go to one that I learned, and then a second one, and then this third one that we're on now. And him and Kim and Carlos and Billy are all like, yeah, this is not working for us now. And so they're thinking about switching to another one. But we're not 30 people like you.
Mhm.
we're 15. And so, and JC would like to take the company to that level. I mean, we don't say it
Yeah.
out loud that much because, we're all like, can we please just like have a few moments at this level where we feel like we really got our feet under us, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And that's
but
such a normal feeling. I feel
yeah,
like we talk so much about growth. Everyone wants to talk about growth, but within growth, there are those moments where you're just like, can we just be
yeah.
good here for a
See,
minute?
my
Can
thing
we
is,
be
I
good
want
here?
that management squared away, selfishly.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
Vin and I are, quote unquote, chairman of the board of
Mhm.
Window Works and completely advisory at this point. And they are all working so hard and so diligently that I don't know that they don't really see objectively that we are still in need of true defined management departments with defined accountability. We have
Yeah.
KPIs, but we don't
Yeah.
necessarily have the accountability to all the KPIs.
Sure.
And I'm just sort of like, you know, I don't know, can we run a half marathon before we run a marathon? But it's not my company anymore. And the man
Yeah.
is driven. And so he's plowing through, and we'll just be around to help bolster where we can.
Yeah. Well, you'll one way or another, any business will hit a point either because they're projecting it and preparing for it, or because the moment just you hit that point where you're like, well, we don't have a choice. We
That's it.
have to
We're
sit down and
rolling
deal with
down.
this.
Yeah.
And you've heard me say before, LuAnn, there are certain moments where I even with my team, where I want to jump in. I'm like, oh, I can already see what's coming. I want to jump in. I want to fix it. And I'm just learning more and more, ask some questions, offer advice. But, you know, oftentimes until you experience hitting that wall or stumbling through that thing, you just won't really believe how important it is to set the process, prepare, have the timeline, whatever it is. Those process related things in particular, they get really real once you've experienced how things fail without them.
Yeah.
But for a business owner who is inclined toward growth and who believes in the power of, process, or who understands that there's a difference between growth and scalability,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's excellent, because now you don't need to stumble. You can just believe all of us when we tell you it's not fun. We've done it. It's not fun. So instead, you can prepare ahead,
Yeah.
and you'll still stumble, but maybe your trips will, be down one stair rather than five, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you won't break your ankle. You'll just tweak it a little bit,
Yeah.
because
It's
none
true.
of us come out perfectly unscathed.
No, no, we definitely don't. And I know that you share this with me. We're not discouraging anyone from wanting to go from 1 to 5 or 5 to 10 or 10 to 30. Um, and I just, wrapping it all in a bow, I think comparing my own hindsights with the things that you said today, I think the two things that stand out for me, I knew coming into this, and I've long figured this out. When we went from 1.8 to 3 million, I remember thinking, what the heck is going on here? It just, the whole world, we were running our business. The clients were having their situations, and they were, say 85% having positive experiences and all of that stuff. But from 1.8 to 3 million, I felt like we dropped more balls in that 2 or 3 years of growth than we had in the 20 years prior to that. And it wasn't until I really started to reflect and I went, oh, that's right, because our systems, to your point, are set up from it to go from me to Vinny, or from Billy to me, or from me to Billy, or for the showroom admin to me. And now all of a sudden we had Kim and Carlos and Adriana and other people in there. And every time we had a problem, little or big, I was like, oh, because the path is not defined. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, you see the systems that got us to 1.8, it's the same system, but there's
Mhm.
different people touching it now. And so it has to be redefined how it happens. And that kind of takes you by surprise. And so my point is, and my little wrapping it up here is that I've known and I've discovered that 4 or 5 years ago. What I learned today talking to you was, oh, and as I was discovering it, and as I was noticing it and as I was experiencing it, I needed to be verbal about it to everybody. Instead of what I did was I just started reading every business book on the planet and trying to do all the things. And I'm like, well, what's the new way that you're going to help Vinny lead this team? And, you have to influence him because he's a cowboy. He wants to do it his way and you have to understand. And it was like, I kept trying to figure it out myself as
You kept trying to
opposed to,
be the boss, the one
yes,
and only.
exact. Well, right. And so my aha today is, oh, even if when you started to feel the earth move, if you started to have open conversations with that core trusted original group of people, things are going to be different. Things have to
Mhm.
change. And we were having, to be fair, I'm having the actual tactical conversations. Hey guys, this used to be our system, but now we've got Kim in the middle between me and Catherine, so this is the new system. I was doing the tactical stuff, but I
Mhm.
wasn't doing the setting the stage to your lesson of talk about the winds of change, understand that we're going to a different place, and we all have to think about what are your gifts, what are your strengths, how do you want to show up in this next level team, and do you want to have a management role, or do you just as soon stay really important over here and understand this area is going to need a manager? And if you don't want to, because I can see that now, hindsight, I could have
Right.
said this area is going to need a manager. You and I can talk about if you want to be the manager, but if you don't, you have to be okay with having been here 15, 20, 30 years and someone else is going to be your manager, which could be totally fine for some people. Like, great, I just want to show up and do my job. But instead, we automatically elevated people because of longevity and expertise.
Yeah. And I think there are some points out of that too. The mindsets that have to shift start with you,
Yes, that's
because
my
you
point. I'm like,
can't, yeah,
bang.
yeah, you can't just try to solve everything yourself because this has become a bigger team. So you've got to bring them in sooner. You have to trust them as leaders so that they can lead, they being the team that you do, elevate. And you also can really start preparing your leaders, and you can send them to training, you can send them to things, and that helps to set a mindset of this is a thing you'll be doing. But I think what becomes really important is the conversation. It's not a personal conversation, it is a conversation about the new role. In this
Yes.
role, it is going to be important that the person in this role do X and Y and Z, which are completely different from what you have done. I'm considering you for this role because you've been so good at A, B, and C. But to do
Mm-hmm.
well at this new role, you have to really be committed to X, Y, and Z. Do you actually want that? Because when
Right.
those things are laid out, when it's like you will need to meet every single week with every one of your direct reports, you will need to give direct and critical feedback, you will need to keep them motivated. You will need to, all of these things along the way. Once you start talking about that, it's like, oh, do I want that? And so like to this day on our team, I have senior designers who are incredibly, incredibly talented. And about half of them manage another designer. And about half of them are like, nope, no, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
I
No.
am I'm happy to do what I do and I don't manage someone. And
And they're not intimidated and they don't feel less than because you had this thoughtful conversation that set it up, that I'm considering you. In my mind, you're a candidate for this, but you decide, you consider, do you want this? See,
Mhm.
that is the big aha of this conversation, I have to say, in my mind. I love that,
Yeah.
because now they're not, on a simple way to say it, they're not losing face by not being a manager. They've chosen not to be a manager.
Yeah. Well, and it becomes a conversation too of, to move into this role means you're not solely a designer anymore. For instance, I'm using designer as an example because we're
Yes,
talking about design firms,
sure.
but there are others on the team that I could be talking about too. But yeah, within a design team, you have these senior designers or people who are senior in the role, whatever title they have. And yeah, to be a manager, in whatever capacity that is, you're no longer just a designer. If you want your career to be focused just specifically on design, don't do this.
Right.
Don't do this.
Don't take
If
it.
you want your role to expand into some new things and skill sets, absolutely it's available to you, but it's not necessary. And there are ways for you to be a leader without being a manager. And there are
Right.
ways for you
Love
to
that.
develop as a designer and to go further and further without needing to manage teams or people. And that is the challenge, I think, for us as founders and owners and the runners of the business, is to make sure that if we're hoping to keep people on our team in the long run, that we're giving them, yes, a good work environment, yes, clarity, yes, defined roles and expectations, all of those things we always talk about, but also a career path.
Yeah.
And I think what tends to happen when we grow is the career path just unfolds. It is how it feels, right? It feels
Yes.
to us, oh, the career path has unfolded. We need now someone to run this department, and now that's what you will do because that's the next thing. And it's like, no, 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 no. This has nothing to do with that role.
Right.
This is a new need of the business. And if I don't have, independently of this random thing that grew out of growth, if I don't have a career path for my designer, that's a different thing to consider entirely. So I do think that's where things get tangled, is the difference between career path and management needs as
Yes.
things scale.
Yeah, so good. I love it. It's so good. Tons of nuggets in here. And of course, we both know that we could do this for 5 more hours.
We
We'd
could.
run out of tape and all the things. But I love this. And I love that we're going to continue these conversations, Kate, over the next several months. And we're just going to take a single topic like this here and there. And I'm just going to pick your brain on it, on the lessons that you've learned and the way that you navigate running this big, awesome team in this second generation business. It's outstanding. So thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, Kate.
Well, thank you, LuAnn. I can't wait. I'm really excited about this. I'm glad we made this one happen.